Thank you so much for joining us today. What's the state of veterinary care in Idaho right now?
Well, Melissa, there is a shortage of veterinarians in Idaho, and this is part of a national trend that is not unique to Idaho, but is a little more severe when you look at the population of rural veterinarians in rural locations. And because there's a very large animal population in Idaho, about 2.7 million cattle and sheep, and probably about 170,000 horses and over 1 million dogs and cats. So that means that there is really a need for not only veterinarians in rural locations, but large animal veterinarians.
This isn't specific to Idaho, but what are the causes of these shortages that we're seeing?
Okay, so the first, there are more openings, so opportunities right now than there are veterinarians to fill those. I think I mentioned earlier that there are 18 open positions for every veterinarian looking for work. The other causes are that large animal veterinarians have their actual incomes about 30% less than mixed animal or small animal veterinarians. They graduate with a very large debt load for veterinary school, about $270,000. And the starting salaries are in the $60,000 to $90,000 range. So it's difficult for them to keep up with their payments and maintain a rural veterinary practice. So these are kinds of things we're looking at in our task force.
You mentioned that the shortages are especially acute in rural areas. When we're looking at Idaho, there's a lot of rural counties in Idaho, of course. Are there any rural counties that are especially affected by these shortages?
Well, we have the greatest concentration of cattle and sheep is in the lower third of Idaho. So those counties tend to have more acute issues.
Especially that Snake River Plain.
Right. Correct.
That's where we see the dairies in Magic Valley and Treasure Valley.
Yep.
So you were the chair of the Idaho Veterinary Medicine Task Force. What kind of policy proposals might help with these shortages?
Well, we looked at several issues. The first, we currently have 11 slots. The University of Idaho has 11 slots.
For veterinary medicine?
For veterinary medicine in what's called the WIMU program. That's Washington, Idaho, Montana, Utah consortium with the students from each state going to Washington State Veterinary School. We have 11 slots in that school system. So we, if you look at all 4 years, then we'd have 44 students that we support through the state legislature, the out-of-state tuition costs.
So these are specifically 11 Idaho students per year who are able to go and get this education at Washington State University.
Right, if they're selected.
Sure.
It's a very competitive process. We have about 3 applicants for every open slot, so that makes it a very competitive process. Also, you don't have to be a graduate of the University of Idaho. You just need to be a resident of Idaho to apply. So there are graduates of other schools who are Idaho residents who also apply. So it is a very competitive process. Now, we looked at that as one piece. What can we do to expand the number of students? But right now, one of the problems inside the WIMU program is that there is no requirement for them to stay in Idaho once they have finished. Most states that have programs where they want to locate students in the state, they provide tuition support. In return, they sign a contract to stay in the state after graduation. One of our recommendations is to adopt that requirement that we ask that students who are supported in this program locate to a rural location or stay within the state of Idaho after graduation.
That's a requirement that's going to sound familiar to people who have been following the healthcare worker shortages
Right.
in Idaho for a long time, because those are discussions that came up with the rural nurse tuition repayment program, the WWAMI
Yep.
program for
Exactly.
medical students.
In fact, this is modeled very closely to the WWAMI, what's called the TRUST program. They're targeted rural underserved tract of physicians. So what we're saying is we'd like to expand our group of students from 11 to 20, and also develop what's called a 1+3 program, where the first year they're at Idaho, and in that first year, 10 of the 20 are selected for a rural track, and those 10 would receive tuition support throughout their entire program, which if they locate to a rural location, they don't have to pay back. If they don't locate in Idaho in a rural location, they would have to reimburse the state for that. And the other 10 students who are in the WWAMI program but are not large animal or rural veterinary track, they would just be required to stay in the state of Idaho, not to any specific location.
So they could be small animal veterinarians in
That's
Coeur
right.
d'Alene or Idaho Falls.
Correct.
Got it. You presented these policy proposals to the legislature earlier this year. How did lawmakers receive those proposals?
They were well received in both the Senate and the House. In the House, Representative Lori McCann has volunteered to draft a bill, and of course that our part in the process is over now that we've finished our report, but we did offer our support in providing any information they need to write this legislation. It won't be considered very likely this year because it's too
Hopefully
late
nearing
in
the
the
end.
session. Yeah. So we're hopeful that next year there will be a proposal ready to be evaluated by the legislature.
All right. Bob Collier, Chair of the Idaho Veterinary Medicine Task Force and Department Head of University of Idaho's Animal, Veterinary and Food Sciences Department. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Melissa. Been a pleasure.